So, first off, welcome to the first episode of Dirty Talk with Delilah. Yay! I need like a jingle or something. Maybe I'll have one day. And just like really quickly, the reason that I started this Instagram live venture is because, I refer to myself as a very sexually liberated individual, and I'm very open when I talk about sex and topics pertaining to sex. And I think that our society as a whole, especially in America, we treat that topic as very taboo. And I just want to, normalize a few things and, just have an open forum where we can discuss sex because everything revolves around sex. I mean, we're all here because two people had sex. So, with that being said, our first guest that we're going to have on the show is a dear friend of mine, and she's also my burlesque troupe mate. Her name is Kat Carlisle, and she is known as Bootleg Therapy on Instagram. Let me tell you her little tagline. It's cute. She is known as an unlicensed sexy therapist with an educational background in psychology, and she is here to talk about your fantasies, the girls in your life, and the ones you're trying to get. So let me get her on really quickly, and we'll start. Hi,
Hi.
you look gorgeous.
Sweet.
Hello,
Oh,
darling.
thank you. Same. I was
Hello.
like, yes, bitches with the red lips.
Get that red lip on. I got red lips, red wine, red nails.
Oh, I poured myself more tequila when I saw you, and then I was like, ooh, headphones. I should get some AirPods
Yes,
in.
because the sound, I've found that the sound is way better. Because
Cool.
whenever you do it without headphones or AirPods, like you can hear, like the echoing like in your
Too
house and
much.
stuff. Yeah. So, but yeah, and
Yeah.
I couldn't find my AirPods, so I have to use these. But does it sound okay to you?
You sound fabulous. Can
Okay.
you hear me all
I can.
right?
Yeah, you sound great. Okay, cool. So
Awesome.
let's get started. I have a little outline.
Dope.
So first of all, just introduce yourself to everyone.
Hi, yeah, I'm Kat. I am fucking stoked to get to be on the first episode of Dirty Talk with Delilah.
Yay.
Damn. Yeah, so honored. You are a fucking cool chick, and I think that the topic of being able to talk about sexual liberation and breaking some negative stereotypes about sex positivity, what have you. I mean, this is important. So, yeah, I appreciate and support all of the things you're doing.
Thank you. That means a lot. But yes, I'm so honored to have you as my first guest. I'm super excited. Tell me a little bit about what you want to talk about today.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about sexual deviance
Hmm.
and what that means for mental health.
Okay.
Right. So, like in kind of a snippet, I had so my background is psychology. I have kind of a background of hearing that if you have sexually deviant behavior, this meant that there was something wrong with you. And I would like to address it. So, if you're kinky, does that mean there's something wrong with you? If you got a
Yeah.
foot fetish, does it mean there's something wrong with you? Like, let's. I would like to dive into those types of
Yeah.
things.
And also on that note, I feel like a lot of things that, especially in American culture, that we view as sexual deviance or as something that's like out of the norm sexually might actually be
Hmm.
something that is actually pretty normal. But like we live in such a sexually
People don't talk.
repressed, yeah, we live in such a sexually repressed society that people aren't open about it, so they don't talk about it. So like, I mean, one thing that I've learned recently is that a foot fetish is like one of the most common fetishes that people have. But whenever
Yeah, right,
whenever you
right.
first hear about it, you're like, oh, that's weird. But it's actually very, very common. But because we're taught to repress these taboo,
Hmm.
issues, then you think that you're like, a weirdo or you're,
We're
some kind of
alone.
deviant.
We're
Yeah,
alone with that.
exactly.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly. Anyway, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. So the word in and of itself is a little misleading. I'll go ahead and kind of like go into what got me interested in this topic, because
Okay.
it's kind of a long story, but it'll make sense in the end. Growing up as a kid, I was pretty like open-minded and flexible about like life and sexuality and stuff like that. But I ended up having some shit that happened in my life. I went to rehab for an eating disorder, and I went to a really conservative environment. And I was in Abilene, if anybody knows where that is. I went to rehab out in Abilene, and I was thrust into this very conservative 12-step bubble. And I put myself in it because it got me better from an eating disorder that I had. But it also made it to where I was having these I was surrounded by all of these ideas of polyamory is obviously bad. Any type of fetish is obviously bad. Any type of
Yeah.
kink is obviously
Yeah. If
like, there
you're
were
not
all of
having
the
missionary with your husband, then no. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
missionary. Maybe there could be like a cat in the window looking at you, but that's about it. That's only threesome allowed.
Okay.
I was in this environment, and but I was super interested in psychology still. So I went to college in Abilene, got my bachelor's in psychology. The curriculum was still very traditional, like unusually traditional. I actually had a conversation with a conversion therapist, which like is not it's not a thing anymore. It's not a thing anymore, right? So like the fact, yeah.
Whew.
So the fact that I was around this, I was like, whoa, I don't believe in these things, but they're kind of like seeping into the back of my head. I'm around it all the time, right? So it made me feel very uncomfortable with being able to talk about sex. So in college, I think I had sex for the first time when I was like 23. I think I drank for the first time when I was 23. Like I was very much like a repressed child when it comes to that kind of stuff. And when I was trying to have sex for the first time, it was so frustrating because I wanted to be good at it, but like it was not even enjoyable to me for so many years. So the majority of my 20s, I was just kind of like, intercourse feels like weird, like not good. I don't really get what the movies are talking about. Like and sex is often this thing that we're just supposed to know how to do. We're just supposed to like know how to be good at it without actually talking about it or going into like discussing kind of like nitty gritties or like uncomfortable things, right?
Which is odd because like sex is something that like, I mean, 99.9% of us are inevitably gonna,
We
participate
all
in.
do, right?
So, maybe we should
Yeah.
learn how to do it properly. I don't know. Yeah.
It's real. It's real. It's like there's all of this like diet information out there. Like we can talk about food everybody eats. We can talk about like sleep and stuff like that. But like sex is, just kind of like
Yeah.
uncomfortable. It's got a taboo to it that, is just like this weird puritanical thing that we're all kind of born into America, right?
Yeah.
So I leave from college. I had a boyfriend who he lived in Dallas, and I was like, well, I don't know where the fuck to go. I guess I'll go to Dallas. End up here, and
That's how I
I
ended
went
up in
to
Dallas.
the best way.
Boyfriends in Dallas.
You come for them. You may not stay for them, but you might come for them. So followed him here and fell in love with Dallas. I ended up going to UT Southwestern for graduate school. And I was really interested in neuropsychology. So I did a lot of like assessment for neurological illnesses. I did a lot of psychological counseling for people who had neurological illnesses, things like that. And so this was interesting to me, but I still had this like burning desire to understand more about sex education, right? So like I was doing kind of like this normal like neuropsych type stuff, but like in my extracurricular learning type things, I was like, can I have like a class on polyamory? Can I have like a class on these other like random like sexually out of the norm, deviant, may we say, type things. And so I kind of like thrust myself into learning as much about sex positivity as possible. So psychological sex, there's a movement called sex positivity, and it is also a phenomenon amongst psychology. So I'm going to read the definition to you real quick because I feel like it'll kind of make a little bit more sense. So this is a term used to describe individuals and communities who emphasize openness, non-judgmental attitudes, freedom, and liberation from sexuality and sexual oppression. So this is a movement amongst humans and also a movement amongst psychology. So I became really intrigued by this. Around the same time that I was trying to understand my own sexuality, especially because I was like, how do I have an orgasm? That was like a breathtaking thing to me to kind of like figure that shit out. Thank you, vibrators. But you know, all like learning all of that shit, right? And along the same time period, I did burlesque for the first time, right? So I had my first experience and I was like, ooh, being on stage, being naked on stage, that sounds crazy. I'm gonna do it. And when I did it, it was like totally the gateway drug, right? I was like, this is the thing. This is this is like my home. I didn't know it was a home, but it is my home. And shortly after I did my first burlesque performance, I talked to a girl who worked at a strip club local to where I live. And she worked there, and I was like, interesting. I don't know if I've ever like actually really like sat down and talked to somebody who danced at a strip club. And I was like, I want to come see what that's about. Also along the same time, I had been getting funding for my family to go to grad school. And then all of a sudden, like some shit happened and I didn't have funding anymore. So I was like, oh, I'm broke also. So like, also stripping seems interesting. Also, I'm broke. This would be an interesting option to make more money. And I remember the first time I went to a strip club, like the back of my hand, like it was a Sunday. I remember walking in there and going, oh my God, this is a strip club? This is cool. This is the cool thing. And I got a job there 2 days later. I went from never having been to a strip club to like working at one in a couple of days. I went from 0 to 60. And this was and it was a crazy experience for me because I had actually said in my lifetime, like, I think that if you are a stripper, it probably means that you've got some type of like other underlying issues going on.
Yes.
Because that had been my experience of it so far. And then once I was in it, I was like, oh my God, there was this total dichotomy within me because it was like, okay, I'm pretty put together. Like, I think I'm put together.
I want to touch on that for a second. So yeah, that's like a total like misconception about strippers, sex workers, you know, cam girls, you know, whatever, like in general that, you know, or burlesque dancers, you know, that we have daddy issues, you know, like, oh, we feel like, you know, we need to like take off our clothes to feel accepted. I'm like, no, I'd like to take off my clothes because I look damn good, honey. And I want you to look at me and I want you to give me your money. So I don't understand, you know, like, and I don't have daddy issues. Like, I have an amazing relationship with my father. Like, my father has been to my burlesque shows before, you know, like, you know, like, it's just so crazy to me that's like such a common misconception, you know? Anyway, sorry, keep going.
It is. Yeah. It's a really fucked up stereotype. And one of my favorite people, her name is Jinxie on Instagram.
Love
really made a statement to me one day about how you know, sex work is one of the only industries where women, we rule. Like, we're good at being sexy. We're good at being sensual. We're good at being in tune with like how to like make things feel good and how to have like a tactile experience and how to really like draw out the fun in sex.
Yeah.
And we reign. We are the queens of all of it.
Yes. Like to
And
call it,
it is,
we're the queens of the underworld. That's what I like to call it.
yes, queens of
Yeah.
the underworld. Thank you. I love that. And so it's this one industry where we're just better than men, no matter what. I mean, no offense, gay dudes are really good also. Anyway, for the most part, we win, kind of. And, and it's repressed, uh,
Hold on.
partially, I think, because of that reason. Yeah.
Chris will be taking questions at the end. So
Oh,
ask all the
questions. Oh,
questions you
okay.
want, baby, at the end though. Okay, keep going.
Please. Yeah. Yeah, I want to answer. Okay, so where was I going with that? Stripper, that was a dichotomy for me. It was a very, that was a pivotal point in my life where I was like, okay, I am a sex worker now,
Hmm.
and I'm fucking good at it, and I like it. Like so okay, that blew my mind. And what else does that mean about things that are sexually deviant, right? And
Right.
that just kind of like led me off on this entire rabbit trail of trying to investigate like why there's all of these things that are deemed as weird or deemed as maybe you have a mental health issue if you're interested in it, but is that really the case? Is it really more of a societal issue?
Which I think it is. So let's go back to you working at the strip club. Is there anything that you learned while working as a stripper that was particularly fascinating?
Yes. Yeah, totally. So one of the things that I saw working at a strip club felt like the most exciting field work I had ever done. Like the entire time, I was just kind of like, oh my God, tell me all of your problems. Like, and also it's interesting to be a dancer because guys. And bear with me, the majority of my customers were guys, right?
Yeah,
So
of course. Yeah.
and they were by seeing me as this person who is kind of like faceless and kind
Hmm.
of like I'm non-judgmental, I'm a stripper, you
Hmm.
can't I don't give a fuck what you do. And so
Strippers
they
are
would tell,
therapists.
oh
Strippers are
my God, they would
yes.
tell me, yes, 100%. And so, like, the nuggets of good information that I got to just like hear and digest and explore was really interesting to me. And one of the biggest things that I saw is that a lot of my customers and clients had very similar experiences to what I had, right?
Hmm.
Of this feeling of uh, having a sexual need, but not really knowing how to address it. And I wrote some notes on it. Give me 1 second. Yeah, so a lot of clients who I saw were in a relationship and they wanted some additional sexual spice, and then they were feeling conflicted about having this need. A lot of what I saw also was clients who wanted to express a particular kink or need, and then didn't feel like they knew how to talk about it with anybody else. So that was
Yeah, so basically, like,
the
maybe they
common
wanted to like
reoccurring.
try something with their partner, but they were too, embarrassed or nervous or ashamed or whatever to bring that up. That's what you're saying? Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Mm.
Do you have any more examples? Sorry,
Oh,
I thought you were reading examples. Um,
my no, no, no. So that was kind of the end of that answer.
okay. So you mentioned sex positive psychology, the sex positive psychology movement earlier. You gave us a definition.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us like how this movement kind of related to your work as a stripper? Like how did it relate to your experience with clients and customers?
Totally. Yeah. So again, sex positivity is this idea of being open-minded about sexual kinks and kind of like fetishes, and rather than deeming them as bad or something wrong, seeing it as something that is like an acceptable part of humanity. And it is, let me see real quick. Right. So it's an idea amongst psychological communities that believe that sexual kinks or desires are okay. So I wanted to unpack this a little bit with an example.
Okay.
So if a partner expresses their desire to be dominated, and their spouse is offended by this, that person who requested the domination may then in turn feel disgusted with themselves for having the thought and then requesting it. And then this feeling of disgust can turn into a feeling of self-hate and aloneness, right? So kind of an older and more conservative view amongst psychologists would have said, okay, this person is obviously experiencing psychological distress because they've got this self-hate and this self-loathing, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas a more progressive view would talk about the inclination to want to be sexually dominated is not bad. The thing that is the issue is the person's environment. Mm-hmm. So that can in turn cause mental health issues because they are not able to be at peace with their desire. So that is really, kind of like a complicated web of things. And this argument kind of goes back to when people talked about, or when psychologists specifically talked about homosexuality being a mental illness, right? They would say that, okay, well, so many people who are gay are also depressed and have high rates of mental illness and suicide and whatnot. So that must inherently mean that being gay is a mental illness. Whereas, today we would say, oh my God, being gay is fine. The reason why there was so much depression and suicide is because their family not accepting them, mm-hmm. and their friends not accepting them, and being alone and not being able to cope with all of these feelings, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get back to the main question, what we came here to talk about. So if you have sexually deviant thoughts or behaviors, does this mean that you will have mental health issues, or, how does one affect the other, I guess?
Sure. Yeah, so the thing when it comes to humans in general is there is no black or white. Mm-hmm. in anything. So the more I learn, the older I get, like there's just no like the way that we as humans operate tends to be on a spectrum in general. So actually, the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for psychological illnesses, has been moving away from categories to spectrums of identifying mental illness. So, for example, autism is no longer like you've got Asperger's and you've got autism. Instead, you're on a scale.
Yeah.
And instead of there's a section for personality disorders, and instead of them being categories, what they're talking about moving it to is just moving all personality disorders onto a scale of sorts, because humans are not black or white, and similar to sexuality, right? So like I think it's very rare that a person is 100% straight or 100% gay. Like you've mm-hmm. never had a thought about the same sex, or you've never had a thought about the opposite sex. Mm-hmm. Like that seems very strict and rigid, mm-hmm. right? So similar things when it comes to sexual kinks is there's a sliding scale of things, right? Like if you are not paying attention to your children because you really want to get tied up in leather, that's an issue, right? Yeah. But if you're like a functioning human and you still want to get tied up in leather,
yeah, you like to get spanked every once in a while. What's wrong with that?
Yeah. You right. So it's very much a fluid thing, and one of the things I forgot to talk about earlier, and when I talk about sexual deviance.
Deviancy. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I have a
Never
problem
mind.
with like pronouncing words sometimes as
Dude,
well,
words
by
can
the
be
way.
hard. Yeah.
I'm from Louisiana, so like sometimes I'll say stuff and I'll be like, did I say that
Was
properly?
that
What the hell? Anyway, keep going. Sorry.
yeah. Well, and I also feel like because of social distancing, I'm talking to less people. So I'm
hmm
like, when I talk now, I'm like, what is that word? What is the thing coming out of my mouth?
Speaking out
I'm just like,
loud to another
weird,
person? What is that? Yeah.
weird, so weird. Oh, where was I going with that? Sexual deviancy and, oh yeah, okay. So I am never talking about anything that is harmful to another human being. So the DSM, again, the manual for psychologists, is something is turns into a mental illness if it causes distress to that person or to the people around them, and it's harmful, right? So child molestation obviously is not acceptable.
hmm
Things like autoerotic asphyxiation that can get dangerous. So when I talk about deviant, all I'm talking about is like kind of like your run of the mill weird sexual things that is not the norm, but is also not damaging to you or other people as a
Yeah.
human. Um, what was I talking about with that? Hold on.
I think we were talking about like the sliding scale and how sexual deviance can
Yes.
be. Yeah.
Yeah. So just because you have deviant or kinky thoughts or behaviors, that does not inherently mean that you have a mental disorder. And if you have a mental disorder, it doesn't inherently mean that you're going to be kinky. You might
hmm
be like
hmm
straight as fuck and have a lot of mental illnesses,
hmm
right? So those are not the same things. However, what can lead to mental illness is is a culture that represses being able to talk about sex that is unusual and being able to accept sex that is unusual. So, like the example we were talking about previously with the spouse who wanted to be dominated, if they feel like they're a disgusting, inherently bad human being, then that can very easily turn into mental illness. Same as the stripper who, like feels like society won't accept them and then can't talk to anybody about any problems. That can in turn turn into self-hate and a sense of aloneness, and then also mental illness, right? So sexual deviancy is complicated, but not in and of itself an indicator of mental health issues.
Good to know. So it's 9, so we have about 30 minutes left. So
Cool.
let's wrap up the interview portion, and then we'll take questions from people. So I do know that your name on Instagram obviously is Bootleg Therapy, and you do have an OnlyFans page that's also under the same name, Bootleg Therapy. So I just want to talk about what are your efforts with Bootleg Therapy, and I love the name, by the way. Like I
Thank
love that
you.
name.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I love names like Delilah DuBois, Dirty Talk with Delilah. Like I love, interesting eye
Good
catching names.
shit.
Anyway.
Yes, yes. I also love bootleg therapy, and it's kind of a double thing, right? So it's like sexy, like boot and legs and therapy, but at the same time, like I'm not providing actual therapy. So that's a very big disclaimer that
Mhm.
I want to provide. I am not a clinician, so I am trained as a clinician, but I decided that being a slut was more fun.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I'm very much more, I give advice so I do PG type of advice on Instagram, which is like videos about sex tips and relationship advice and things like how do you pick up, girls? How do you talk to women? how do you engage with the opposite sex, the same sex, a love interest, whatever the fuck you want? How do you go about those things? But then Bootleg Therapy on OnlyFans is going to be a X-rated version of that. So I'll get into more of the intricacies of sex advice and whatnot. And also I'll be naked while talking about it. So there'll be a live stream for that. And then also I'm going to have a Twitch live stream on relationship and dating advice as well. So yeah, also OnlyFans, like also cute striptease content as well.
Yes,
Because why not?
because I
Because why
mean,
not?
strippers got to strip. Am I right? Am I
You gotta
right?
do what your
You
heart
gotta do, gotta
desire
do.
is.
All right. Well, thank you
Indeed.
for talking about mental health and sexual preferences and kinks and sex as it pertains to psychology. Thank you very much for
Mm-hmm.
coming on and discussing that with me. So now I'm going to take some questions.
Love.
I think I know what I'm doing. So if you guys, I guess you guys can just put the question, like you can just type it as a comment, or if you hit the little question mark thing at the bottom, you can send a question and it'll pop up on the screen and everybody will be able to see it and we'll be able to see who it's from and we can answer it.
Mm.
So if you have any questions, go ahead. Medi says, Bootleg Therapy, I like your photos. So good.
Woo, thank
She's got
you.
she's got
Thanks,
better
Maddie.
ones. She's got better ones on her OnlyFans.
Oh, girl, yes, that is
Mm,
real. Very real.
I've seen some of them. She's hot.
Mm, mm,
She's hot and
thanks, Lou.
educated. I dig it. I dig it.
Oof, oof, oof.
Ricochet,
Likewise, baby girl.
Ricochet Cabaret said booty, booty for short for bootleg therapy. Booty for short. So,
Yes.
so guys, come on, ask us some questions. It doesn't
Yeah,
have to
this
be.
is
It
the time
doesn't.
to get out weird things.
Yeah, it doesn't particularly have to be about like what we just discussed per se. It would make sense for it to be more about like kinks and sexual deviance and sex as it pertains to mental health and psychology. But if you have any questions, like if you're a guy and you have a question about sex and you're talking to two chicks that like to have sex, let us know. What has
Ooh,
been the
we
most
got a
okay
question.
from Iris? What has been the most rewarding thing about sex work?
Ooh. Um, I think getting to get in touch with my own sexuality has been really a very interesting thing for me. Also, I don't think I ever loved my body and myself as much as I did once I started getting into sex work, because there was part of me that was always like, am I acceptable? I'm not completely sure. But then, like, I got small titties. So I was always really nervous about, like, are people going to like small titties? But then I started getting paid for small titties. And I was like, damn, okay, okay, all right, all right, all right. I dig it.
I'm happy to be with you. You are great. Oh, that is so sweet. Thanks. Thank you for the rose, Betty. A rose,
Oh, yes,
a
for real.
rose for my rose.
Hmm.
But yeah, on that note, yeah, I do think that is the most rewarding thing, and I mean, it's nice to be worshipped. I mean, like I said,
It's nice. Quite
we're
nice.
the queens, the goddesses of the underworld. It's nice
Hmm.
to be appreciated for
Yeah,
something that you love doing.
yeah,
It's a job.
totally.
It's a job. Sex work is a job, and why not do something that you enjoy?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
hey, Kat Dylan. Hey, Davina.
Ooh, shit.
Sexy ladies on this feed.
All good people.
Any more
Yes, yes.
questions? What's your suggestion? Men often have trouble finding the clit. What's your suggestion on finding it? This is a good question.
Oh man. Man. Okay, so look at a diagram. There's the internet. Definitely, like
You can
it's
Google
at
a
the top,
diagram.
right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
you can Google that and find
Yeah.
it, right? But here I think the issue that you might be asking more so than like where is the clit is like, am I so the clit is always pretty much at the same spot for every person, but like how you stimulate it is going to be is going to affect people differently, right? So you just gotta ask about like, is here
Yeah.
good? Is this motion good?
That's
Is this
exactly, yeah.
motion?
That's exactly what I was gonna say. Like you have to be communicative, you know, while you're engaging in, you know, sex and foreplay and, you know, whatever. And I feel like that's one of the issues with what we were discussing earlier about, you know, how people um aren't able to communicate with their partner. You know, it's just so crazy to me that people can be married for 20, 30, 40 years and have never really had a conversation about, you know, what pleases them sexually. And I'm like, uh, you know, I mean, it's not their fault
Yeah.
particularly, you know, it's a societal, you know, issue, but definitely being communicative and, you know, just communicating like, okay, this feels good to me. This doesn't feel good to me. You know, like I'd rather you do it this way next time. You know, that's
Mm-hmm.
very important and it can be really sexy too. You know, like I'm definitely like a
Oh, I
person
know
like,
it's a turn on.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know, like I love like
Dirty
talk.
talk.
Yeah, that's why this is called dirty talk. But yeah, so yeah, just communicate and like she said, you know, look up a diagram if you
Mm-hmm.
still have problems.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how do you know when to share kinks with a partner? I am worried to do it too soon.
Ah, okay. So this is like in a new relationship. Um, that's a really good question. It kind of takes some feeling out, right? Like I don't think revealing a kink on the first date is necessarily
Yeah,
the best.
like
Is
hello, I like
necessarily.
to be pegged. You know, like I mean, which you know, like for me, if I was on a first date and someone did that, I'd be like, okay, that's cool, like whatever. But you know,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, generally that's not first date talk. But I would say if you have, you know, moved to, you know, the next step, or you know, like obviously I'm not going to judge anybody. You know, like if you fuck, you know, on the first hour you meet somebody, or a year later, you know, that's up to you. That's, you know, at your discretion. But I think that once you become sexually active with someone, then I mean that would be the time to, you know, like start, you know, at least like starting the conversation. You know, like you don't have to, you know, go full out, hey, we fucked for the first time last night. So next time this is what I like, let's do this, you know, but I think that, you know, once you've reached that level in your relationship, then, you know, it's a good time to start talking about it. Because I mean, like, if you're gonna have sex with each other, why not talk about having sex with each other? You know, it's what's the problem?
it's good. Well, and also the second that you talk about it, it opens the door to maybe that person is really interested in whatever the kink is, but they're nervous to talk about it,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So I think being upfront about it sooner than later is probably good. And if that person is like, that is gross, I would never do that in my entire life, that is good information to have because there's going to be another person out there who really has your kink also, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's sexual compatibility is a real thing. So I think that kind of getting it out there and knowing that if your kink is weird, it's not that weird, right? Like there's going to be someone else out there for you.
Yeah. Um, the next question. Describe your first time performing in front of an audience. Were you nervous? I'll answer this first. I was nervous, but well, this is my friend.
I don't know.
Um, my friend. Um, yeah, my and I think he was at my first show. I don't remember. He was he at my first show? Were you at my first show? I don't know. Regardless, um, first time performing in front of an audience. I was nervous, but I have like always been a performer at heart. Like I love being on
Mm-hmm.
stage. I host shows. You know, I've danced before. I've done musical theater. You know, I was a singer. You know, like I love being on stage, and I am a total fucking ham. So I was nervous, yes, but once I did it, it was enjoyable to me. Like, I mean, it's kind of a turn on for me, honestly, you know, like being on stage and having everyone, you know, looking at me, you know, like, you know, this is my moment, you know, like, yeah, fuck yeah, look
Mm-hmm.
at me, you know, that's how
Mm-hmm.
I felt. Yeah.
Good. Yeah,
Go ahead.
totally. And are you like baton off to you? I always, I always liked being on stage. It's never for whatever, like I get nervous about other things. Like I get nervous about like business meetings, or I get nervous about like I don't know what it is, but like being naked and on stage is not a concerning thing to me for whatever reason. I think it's just I've always been a performer, and I just kind of like just kind of feel like I don't give a shit what anybody thinks about me.
Oh, yes, exactly. Like, yeah, I've always, I mean, you can ask my parents, I've always had a fuck you attitude my whole life. And I've always just been like, I don't care what you think. So this is what I'm going to do. So, and I
I'm gonna
look
do it
good naked. So
anyway.
you go look at it.
Yes.
Okay, see, what's the
Yes.
best way to negotiate boundaries around sex? Good question.
Yeah. Um, think about this for a second. So, I mean, it's boundaries around sex. So, I mean, it just kind of takes bringing it up, right? And being able to hear your partner out, be able to, I think probably one of the best ways you can do it is just by kind of putting everything on the table and seeing what your partner picks and chooses from, of like, that sounds good, this doesn't sound good. So like if you're like, man, I'm really interested in anal, I'm very interested in threesomes, and I want to incorporate more toys, your partner might be interested in 2 out of 3, but man, they do not want to do anal to save their lives. So I think that just kind of talking about it as explicitly as possible allows for you guys to find the overlapping spots.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. I mean, like I said, it just all just comes back to communication. And I know that bringing it up in the first place can be kind of like awkward or like a hard conversation to bring up, but like I said, like if you've already been intimate with this person, then it shouldn't be that hard of a conversation. Like we've already had sex, we should be able to discuss having sex. And like, I mean, and I'm not trying to shame anyone who does, like feel hesitant or apprehensive to start conversations like that, because like I said, society has, like ingrained in our heads that, you don't talk about
Yeah.
sex, even though we all do it and we're all here because of it. But yeah, I think it's, I mean, you just have to kind of like break yourself out of that mindset and just be able to talk to your partner, like just like you can fuck your partner, you should be able to talk to your partner.
Yeah.
Let's see. I have some questions that have popped up, so I'll press them in a second. Let's see. Do I sing? Yes. Y'all really still using wired
Do you?
earbuds?
That's
That was Ricochet asking. Okay, so do I still use wire?
oh.
I'm wearing these. Well, if you were here whenever we started the show, you would know that I can't find my AirPods, so I'm using these.
Mm, mm,
So
mm. They're like those are distracting from the titties. I don't like the wire because I want to see the titties.
look, there's the titties. This, by the
Yes.
way,
Oh,
Fashion Nova
so good.
top, Fashion Nova, and this bra
Yeah.
is Adore Me. Hello. Anyway, okay,
Very
so
hot. Very
any
hot.
other questions? Let's see. Okay, so let me press this, and we'll have the questions pop up. Okay, what about family and getting them to accept your open nature?
Ah. Um.
I mean, well, first of all, I don't really discuss sex per se with my family. I mean, I guess that is kind of like would be a little weird, but I do know a lot of families that are very open about talking about sex with each other. For me, I don't really talk about sex with my family, but I mean, they've been to my burlesque shows, like they follow me on Instagram. They know
So
that I have
cool.
an OnlyFans. Like they know that I am a sexually liberated person and they support me no matter what just because they're fucking awesome people. Um, but I don't know. I mean, like, I don't, I'm going to say, I don't think that, at least in my opinion, I don't think that it's important to have your family accept your open nature. I think that if you want to be open about your sexuality and you want to be sexually liberated, then that is between you, yourself, and whoever you're having sex with, which hopefully is none of your family. So I mean, I don't think it's really any
Girl.
any of their business. You don't want to like try to like force someone to accept something that you know they're not going to. But on the other side of that coin, if you want to try to, you know, help them educate themselves, I would recommend, you know, podcasts, shows such as this one, you know, books, just so that they can see that, you know, maybe, okay, my son, my daughter, you know, my niece, nephew, whatever, like they're not just like some fucking weirdo, you know, like there's actual, you know, peer reviewed,
Mm-hmm,
literature about these topics so you can, you know, slide that in. But I mean, once again, in my opinion, having your family accept you sexually, I don't know, it's a non-issue to me. But like I said, my whole life I had a fuck you attitude. I just do whatever I want. I don't care what anyone. I
mm-hmm.
don't care what anyone thinks. Never will. Um, do you have something to add to that?
Word. No, let's hit the next question.
All right. Let's see. Next question.
I pretty much agree with what you said.
Okay. Here's the
What she
question.
said.
Okay, I recently started dating this girl. She's amazing and very sexual. Well, I always wanted a girl that had the same sex drive as me. Well, it turns out she was. I can't read the whole question. Female.
Way more. Oh, wait, I think she was um,
Can you read the whole question? Not working.
something kinky and she wanted to suggest something to get things. No, I don't think I'm looking at the right thing.
Yeah, I'm
Am I?
looking at the question that's like at the bottom. Chirac
Yeah.
Born, if you want to retype that like into the comments so we can see it in full. I don't know why it's like not letting me see the whole question.
Yeah, it's only
Um,
a little bit.
All right, so Derek says, let's say your partner says, I am into trying something kinky and they want you to suggest something to get things started in the kinky world. Your entry level kink suggestions before aggressive level.
For the, I didn't
Go
hear
ahead.
the last part. You were,
Oh,
I didn't
this
hear it.
is
What was
this
it?
is this is Derek 9577's question. It's up there. Basically
Okay.
he's asking like say your partner wants to, you know, like get kinky and try something and they ask for your suggestion, like what would be your recommendation for, you know, kind of like an entry level kink as opposed to being like, hey, tie me up and slather
Mm-hmm.
me in
Mm-hmm.
chocolate sauce and I don't know, suck me in the ass. Like I don't,
Yeah.
like I don't know.
Right, right. I think something that could be really helpful is you could kind of look up a list online of all of the options for whatever the kink is that you're looking into and make like an a la carte menu for them and say like here are some of the different options because you have no idea what's going to sound interesting to her. There might
Yeah.
be something on there that blows your mind where like she wanted that one. So make a list and kind of like have an explanation for them and say like, you choose, you
Yeah.
tell me what you want to start with.
And I also think that if you and your partner are comfortable with watching porn together, this is something that I have always suggested to couples who have like asked me about like how should they introduce kink or, you know,
Hmm hmm
BDSM or whatever um into their lives. And I've always said, you know, like have you ever tried watching porn together? Because that's like an easy way to, okay, let's watch this kind of porn.
Right.
Oh, like they're doing this, you know, on the video. Would you like something like this? Oh, you know, maybe we could try it. Oh, I don't, you know what I mean? Like I think that it's easy. And
hmm
it's a lot
hmm
easier too because you don't have to bring it up yourself. It could just be
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't know, you know, I mean, even if you didn't know that they were, you know, even if you pre-screened the video, um,
Sure.
you
Sure.
know, a little tip, even if you pre-screened the video, um, you know, if you see something happening, you can say, oh, you know, that looks interesting. Maybe we should try that. If they say no, then okay, cool. We can try something else. Um, what else? Let's see. Yes, no, maybe
And
list. Iris suggested doing like a yes, no, maybe list.
ooh, smart. Yep.
Chrissy said
Good idea.
sexual kink bingo, which is cool. I know
Mm.
I'm sure that they have that online, or you could probably find that like you know like a sex toy shop where they have you know like the games and stuff.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
she's basically a sex addict. I'm having a tough time keeping up. What can I do? Well,
Oh.
so Okay, I'll let you talk on this because like the whole addiction thing, I'm not sure if I really believe in sex addiction per se.
I also don't. Yeah.
But you know, you're more well versed and educated on this topic, so I'll let you take this one.
So I think sex addiction is a word that is kind of overused, and so there are people who may use sex as a way to not feel their feelings, or maybe like not cope with life or not deal with things, right? But I don't think that truly you can have a sex addiction, because in order to have an addiction, like to heroin, you have to have tolerance to whatever the thing is. And then you also have to have a withdrawal period from whatever the thing is. So, like, you wouldn't have a withdrawal from not having sex. So, technically, you can't have, like, sex addiction is not so much thing. But let's throw that out the window. I think that that's really just kind of like a
His
technical difficulty.
his way to say it. Okay, 4 to 5
Right.
times a day, every day is brutal.
Oh,
That's a lot.
yeah, it's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a
Fucking.
lot. Wow. Okay. So that is a thing.
She's horny. She wants to fuck her new man. Like, hey, I mean, because
Yeah,
he did say you did say previously, Johnny, you did previously state that this is a new person that you're dating, right? I'm waiting for him to respond. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, maybe maybe it's just like a honeymoon stage thing for her. Like maybe like you got
it could
that
be.
good dick, man. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
but I
Enjoy, but also
but
I can
also,
imagine
I
that would be
mean,
hard.
I mean, like, don't do anything that you're uncomfortable doing. Don't do anything that you don't feel like doing. Just, I mean, gently tell
Yeah.
her, hey, if you want to keep getting this good dick, then you're gonna have to get off it for a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
Refractory period is
Yeah,
biologically a thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I hope that answered your question good enough because we only have about 6 minutes left, and there's a very good question here that I wanted to add. It's can you talk about how for folks with mental or emotional distress, how can kink and sex work itself be a positive way to heal from past trauma and
Mm,
harm? That's a
mm,
very good
mm.
question.
Yeah, that's interesting because it is, it is, that's kind of a thought that people wouldn't necessarily have. They wouldn't think that, okay, maybe you can use sex work as a way to heal. But it is, I think that sex is healing, being able to bond with yourself sexually, being able to bond with another human sexually, even if it's sex, like sex work is still an intimate
Hmm.
and beautiful relationship, right? So I absolutely think that a lot of things can be healed through that act. It's just important to like be self-aware while doing it, right? So like don't use a fuck ton of drugs while you're doing sex work, or like don't self-medicate too much. Journal, make sure you're meditating, make sure
Hmm.
you're exercising. And I think that if you're doing other healthy things in your life, sex work can be just another component of getting to understand yourself better, and connect to other humans better.
Love that. Awesome. Well, we're just about out of time. We have because like I said, on Instagram Live, you only have an hour before it cuts you off. So we are like right within that time period. So perfect. Thank you so much, Kat Carlisle, also known as
Oh
Bootleg
God, no.
Therapy,
Thank you. Thank
for
you.
being
And thank you
here.
everyone.
Yeah, this was so fun. I'm so happy that I randomly decided to finally start this. I mean, I guess I finally had time, but yeah, I decided to start this. Thank you, Jinxie,
Me too. Yeah.
for making the
Dope
flyer.
flyer.
Yes,
Oh my God.
my
Yes.
Miami Vice themed flyer. And
Uh,
thank you to everyone who tuned in and asked questions. Like I'm so happy that this actually worked out and people actually tuned in and asked questions, and I'm really excited to see where this goes. Bootleg Therapy. She will be back in a couple of weeks, and we'll continue more conversations regarding this topic. The guest for next week, it's another woman, yay, female empowerment, and we're going to be what moving forward. I'm trying to have the show on Wednesday nights at 8:30 p.m. But I do know that different people have different schedules. Well, right now while we're all self quarantining, it's probably easier, but just check my Instagram story. Follow Dirty Talk with Delilah on Instagram just to get updates on when the next show is going to be and who the next guest is going to be. So thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you next time on Dirty Talk with Delilah. And keep on
This is
fucking.
amazing.
I
Yes,
need like
do it.
I need a fun tagline, like keep on fucking.
Well,
Talk dirty to me, baby.
ooh,
Let's talk about sex, baby. Like I don't know.
baby, let's talk about.
You
Well,
and
yeah,
me and
we'll
everybody
come up with
else.
something. Mhm.
Yeah. So hey, if any of you people are, if y'all produce music, make me a jingle. I'd love a good jingle. Anyway, all right.
Ooh, that's a good fucking idea.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Oh my
totally.
gosh, thank you so much. So, I do have Iris actually. She is screen recording this, so I will be
Dope.
able to archive this. And if for some reason that didn't work out, I'm just gonna save this to my story, so it'll be up on my story for a while. So I'll be able to archive it for you guys later. But once again, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next week. Bye.
Woo. Bye.